The next sutta is 8.6.51. It's quite an interesting sutta. Once while the Exalted One was staying among the Sakyans in Banyan Tree Park at Kapilavatthu, Mahapajapati the Gautamid came and visited him, and after saluting stood at one side. Thus standing, she said to the Exalted One, Lord, well were it that women folk should be allowed to go forth from the home to homeless life into the Dhamma Vinaya declared by the Tathagata. And the Buddha said, Enough, Gautamid, set not your heart upon the going forth of women from the home to the homeless life into the Dhamma Vinaya declared by the Tathagata. But Mahapajapati besieged him a second time and a third time in like manner, but the Exalted One replied as before. Then Mahapajapati the Gautamid, seeing that the Exalted One would not permit women to go forth from the home, sad and sorrowful, in tears and sobbing, saluted him and departed, keeping him on her right. Just stop here to comment. This Mahapajapati was actually the foster mother of our Buddha. When our Buddha was young, according to the legend, 7 days after our Buddha was born, the real mother passed away, and then the mother's sister is this Mahapajapati. And Mahapajapati was also the wife of the Buddha's father. In the olden days, a person could have as many wives as he could afford to keep. So in actual fact, Mahapajapati was the auntie of the Buddha. And Mahapajapati had her own son by the name of Nanda. And as she brought up Nanda, she also brought up and nursed our Buddha just like her own son. And when the Buddha had become enlightened and came back to see the Sakyans and taught them the Dhamma, and at that time this Mahapajapati was already fairly old, so she wanted to become a nun. And she was the first to ask the Buddha for permission to ordain. But as you see here, the Buddha refused her permission. Now the sutta continues. Now the Exalted One, when he had stayed at Kapilavatthu as long as he desired, set out on a journey to Vesali, and in due course, going from place to place, arrived there. And the Exalted One dwelt near Vesali in Mahavana at the gabled hall. Then Mahapajapati the Gautamid, having had her hair cut off and donned yellow robes, set out with a large company of Sakyan women for Vesali. And in due course they drew near to the gabled hall in Mahavana near Vesali. And Mahapajapati stood outside the door, her feet swollen and her limbs covered with dust, sad and sorrowful, sobbing and in tears. Now the Venerable Ananda saw her standing thus, with swollen feet and in tears, and said to her, Wherefore, Gautamid, do you stand, sad and sorrowful, outside the door? And she said, It is because, Reverend Ananda, the Exalted One will not allow women to go forth from the home to the homeless life into the Dhamma Vinaya declared by the Tathagata. And Venerable Ananda said, Then wait here, Gautamid, until I have asked the Exalted One to allow women to go forth from the home. And the Venerable Ananda went unto the Exalted One and saluted and sat down at one side. So seated he spoke thus, Lord, Mahapajapati the Gautamid stands outside at the door, her feet swollen and her limbs covered with dust, sad and sorrowful, sobbing and in tears, saying, The Exalted One will not allow women to go forth. Lord, well were it that women should be allowed to go forth from the home to the homeless life, into the Dhamma Vinaya declared by the Tathagata. And the Buddha said, Enough, Ananda, set not your heart upon the going forth of women from the home to the homeless life. A second and a third time Ananda beseeched him in like manner, but the Exalted One gave the same reply. Then thought the Venerable Ananda, the Exalted One will not allow women to go forth from the home to the homeless life. What if I were to ask the Exalted One in another way? And he spoke thus, Lord, if women go forth from the home to the homeless life into the Dhamma Vinaya declared by the Tathagata, can they realize the fruit of stream winning, of one's returning, of non-returning, and of arahantship? And the Buddha said, they can, Ananda. And Venerable Ananda said, Lord, if they can, since Mahapajapati has been of great service to the Exalted One, for as his aunt, nurse and foster mother, she gave him milk when the Exalted One's mother died. Well were it that women should be allowed to go forth. And the Buddha said, if Ananda, Mahapajapati the Gautamit, receive these 8 cardinal rules, it shall be for her the ordination. 1. Though she has been ordained 100 years, a nun must pay respect, raise her hands in salutation, rise up from her seat and salute a monk who has but that day been ordained. This is a rule to be honored, respected, revered, venerated, and never to be transgressed during her life. 2. A nun must not spend the rainy season where there is no resident monk. This is a rule never to be transgressed. 3. Twice a month a nun must question the Sangha concerning the date of the Uposatha day and the next time of preaching. This is a rule never to be transgressed. 4. After the rainy season, a nun must keep the Pavarana before both Sanghas in respect of 3 matters, those seen, those heard, and those suspected. This is a rule never to be transgressed. 5. A nun guilty of a serious offense must undergo a penance before both Sanghas for the half month. This is a rule never to be transgressed. 6. After training for 2 rainy seasons in the 6 rules, a nun must seek full ordination of both Sanghas. This is a rule never to be transgressed. 7. Not on any pretext must a nun revile or abuse a monk. This is a rule never to be transgressed. 8. From today, Ananda, admonition by nuns of monks is forbidden, but admonition of nuns by monks is not forbidden. This is a rule to be honored, respected, revered, venerated, and never to be transgressed during life. If Mahapajapati receive these 8 cardinal rules, it shall be for her the ordination. Now when the Venerable Ananda had learned these 8 rules from the Exalted One, he went to Mahapajapati and told her all the Exalted One had said, and she answered him and said, Reverend Ananda, just as a woman or man, young and tender in years and fond of dress, would, after washing the head, receive with both hands a garland of lotus flowers, of jasmine flowers, or of some sweet-scented creeper, and place it on top of the head, even so I, sir, receive these 8 cardinal rules, never to be transgressed all my life. Then the Venerable Ananda returned to the Exalted One, saluted him and sat down at one side. So seated he said, Lord, Mahapajapati the Gautamit has received the 8 rules. And the Buddha said, if Ananda, women had not been allowed to go forth from the home to the homeless life into the Dhamma Vinaya declared by the Tathagata, then long would have lasted the holy life. For 1,000 years would have Sat Dhamma or true Dhamma have lasted. But now, Ananda, since women have gone forth, not for long will the holy life last. Now, Ananda, just for 500 years will the true Dhamma last. Just as those clans that have many women and but few men easily fall a prey to robbers and pot thieves. Even so, Ananda, in whatever Dhamma Vinaya women are allowed to go forth from the home to the homeless life, that holy life will not last long. Just as when the disease known as white as bones falls upon a field of ripened rice, that field does not last long. Even so, Ananda, in whatever Dhamma Vinaya women are allowed to go forth, that holy life will not last long. Just as when the disease known as red rust falls upon a field of ripened sugar cane, that field does not last long. Even so, Ananda, in whatever Dhamma Vinaya women are allowed to go forth, that holy life will not last long. And now, Ananda, just as a man might build a dike to a great reservoir with a view to the future so that no water could pass beyond it, even so I, Ananda, with a view to the future, have laid down for nuns these 8 cardinal rules which must not be transgressed so long as they live. That's the end of the sutta. So we see from here, after Mahapajapati could not get permission of the Buddha to go forth, and then he followed the Buddha all the way, walking from Kapilavatthu to Vesali, and according to the commentary, there was a distance of about 200 miles. So that was a pretty long way to walk. And so the Venerable Ananda asked the Buddha again for permission for women to go forth, and 3 times the Buddha refused him. And then after that, he thought of another way to get round it, and reminded the Buddha that the Buddha owed very much to Mahapajapati, who brought her up, gave her milk when she was small, etc. And so the Buddha relented, and the Buddha made 8 rules for nuns. The first one is that even a nun has been ordained a long time, she must pay respect to a monk, any monk, even though he is very newly ordained. Then second rule is that a monk must not spend the rainy season, the Vasa, where there is no resident monk. In the Theravada tradition, every year during the rainy season in India, they had the rainy season, the winter and the summer seasons, 3 seasons. And 3 months out of the 4 months, a monk or a nun must stay in a fixed place, not leave the place more than 6 continuous nights. So for a nun, she must spend the Vasa in a place where there are monks, at least 1 monk. And the third condition is that twice a month, a nun must ask the Bhikkhu Sangha for the date of the Uposatha, because I think they have to recite the precepts in front of the monk. And then the time of preaching, because every 2 weeks they would have to be given a teaching by a senior monk. And the fourth rule is after the rainy season, a nun must keep the Pavarana before both Sanghas. Pavarana is an invitation to criticize. It is also practiced by monks. When monks have spent Vasa, the rainy season, and after the 3 months of the rainy season, sometimes there is some ill will between monks. So they have to, each one of them, they have to, in a Sangha gathering, starting from the most senior monk, they have to invite criticism from the other monks. Invite the monks to criticize them in case any of the monks has seen or heard or suspected anything wrong. Then the monk invites criticism. So in the case of a nun, she has to invite the nuns to criticize her, and later she has to ask the monks to invite the monks to criticize her as well. The fifth rule is a nun, if she has undergone a serious offense, meaning a sangha disesa. The second most serious offense for a monk or a nun is a sangha disesa. For example, to touch somebody of the opposite sex purposely out of a lustful desire, or to say some lewd words, some vulgar words, etc. So for this class of serious offense, a nun must undergo a penance before both sanghas, the monks and the nuns. The sixth rule, after training for 2 rainy seasons, that means for 2 years in the 6 rules, a nun, she cannot immediately become a nun. She has to keep 6 precepts for 2 years. That was partly because once there was a nun who came to ordain, and after she was ordained, then she became pregnant. And that was not because she did anything wrong, but because she was married before she ordained. So after she ordained, she conceived, and then people talk bad about her. So this was probably the main reason why the Buddha made a rule that a nun must spend 2 years before she gets the full ordination. And then the 7th rule is that a nun must not revile or abuse a monk. And the 8th rule is that monks can criticize nuns, but nuns are not allowed to criticize monks. Now, sometimes women are not happy with this kind of discrimination against women, but it's partly because women are more emotional than men, so that if they are kind, then they are kinder than men. But if they are angry or hateful, then they become much more hateful than men. So it was for this reason. And towards the end, the Buddha told Ananda that if women had not been allowed to go forth, and then the true Dhamma would have lasted 1,000 years. But because women had gone forth, then the true Dhamma would now last only 500 years. And so we can see that the Dhamma was unadulterated for 500 years. And after 500 years, after the Buddha's passing away, from that time onwards, new books were written, new books that contradicted the earlier discourses of the Buddha. So that if we study the suttas, we find the earliest 4 Nikayas, the Digha Nikaya, Majjhima Nikaya, Sangyutta Nikaya, and Anguttara Nikaya. These are the earliest discourses of the Buddha. These, if you read the suttas, there are no contradictions generally. But if you read later books, then you find there's older books, and then the newer books, they contradict each other as well. So we have to be very careful now that the Dhamma has become polluted. It doesn't mean that the true Dhamma is lost. The true Dhamma is still here, but it is mixed up with a lot of our Dhamma, what is contrary to Dhamma. So it is very difficult for people to distinguish between the real Dhamma and the fake Dhamma. And so if you don't get the proper guidance, because most people don't have the time to study all the books to find out, then you might get some wrong views. So you see, the reason the Buddha at first refused permission for women to go forth was actually to protect the Dhamma. He wanted the Dhamma to last longer, to benefit more people. And he said, once women have gone forth, then the sasana, the Buddhist religion has become weakened. the teachings have become weakened, and the Buddha gave an example. Just as there are those clans that have many women but few men, easily fall prey to robbers and pot thieves. So in the same way, once you have women in the holy life, then the sasana is weakened. The next sutta, 8.6.52. Once while the Exalted One was staying at the Gable Hall in Mahavana near Vesali, the Venerable Ananda came to him and saluted and sat down at one side. So seated, he spoke thus to the Exalted One. Lord, how many qualities must a monk have to be considered a spiritual advisor of nuns? A monk, Ananda, must have 8 qualities. What 8? Herein, Ananda, a monk is virtuous. He undertakes and trains himself in the precepts. He is learned. The doctrines he has fully understood in theory. To him both Patimokkha have been properly and fully handed down, sectioned, regulated, and resolved into detail. He has a pleasant voice, his enunciation is good, his speech is urbane, distinct, free from hoarseness and informative. He is able to instruct, incite, rouse and gladden the Sangha of nuns with religious discourse. Generally he is dear to and liked by the nuns. Previous to his taking this Exalted One as his authority for going forth, for donning the yellow robe, he has been guilty of no serious crime. He has been ordained 20 years or more. A monk, Ananda, must have these 8 qualities to be considered a spiritual advisor for nuns. That's the end of the sutta. I just recapitulate these conditions. The first one, a monk must be virtuous. He keeps the precepts. Secondly, he must be learned in the Dhamma. Thirdly, both Patimokkha's, the monk's Patimokkha and the nun's Patimokkha, he fully understands. Number 4, he has a pleasant voice. Number 5, he is able to instruct the nuns with religious discourse, with the Dhamma. Number 6, he is liked by the nuns. Number 7, he has been guilty of no serious crime. Number 8, he has been ordained 20 years or more. A monk who has been ordained 10 years or more is called a Thera. A monk who has been ordained 20 years or more is called a Maha Thera. So these are the qualities. The next sutta is 8.6.53. Once in the Gable Hall at Vesali, Mahapajapati the Gautamit spoke thus to the Exalted One. Well were it for me, Lord, if the Exalted One would teach me Dhamma briefly, so that after hearing the Exalted One's word, I might dwell alone, secluded, earnest, zealous and resolute. And the Buddha said, those things of which you know thus, these things lead to passion, not to release therefrom. These lead to bondage, not to release therefrom. These lead to the piling of rebirth, not to the dispersion thereof. These lead to wanting much, not to wanting little. These lead to discontent, not to contentment. These lead to sociability, not to solitude. These lead to indolence, not to exertion. These lead to luxury, not to frugality. Of these things, hold definitely, this is not Dhamma, this is not Vinaya, this is not the word of the teacher. But as to those things, Gautamit, which you know lead to dispassion, to release from bondage, to the dispersion of rebirth, to wanting little, to contentment, to solitude, to exertion, and to frugality, and in no case to their opposites, be assured that they are Dhamma, they are Vinaya, the word of the teacher. That's the end of the sutta. So here the Buddha is giving a Dhamma teaching in brief to the foster mother, to the mother. These are the things that is Dhamma in concise form. That those things that lead to dispassion, to release from bondage, to dispersion of rebirth, to wanting little, to contentment, to solitude, to exertion, to frugality. These are consistent with the Dhamma Vinaya, but not their opposite. The next sutta is 8.6.54. Once the Exalted One was dwelling among the Kolians at the market town called Kakarapata. There Long Ni, the Kolian clansman, visited the Exalted One, and after greeting him sat down at one side. So seated he spoke thus to the Exalted One. Lord, we householders are immersed in the round of pleasure. We are cumbered with bed, maid and sons. We delight in the muslin cloth from Benares and in sandalwood. We deck ourselves with flowers, with garlands and cosmetics. We enjoy the use of both silver and gold, that is money. Lord, to such as us, let the Exalted One also teach Dhamma, teach the things which will be to our advantage and for our happiness here on earth, for our advantage and happiness in the world to come. And the Buddha said, these four conditions, Tigerfoot, lead to a clansman's advantage and happiness here on earth. What for? Achievement in alertness, achievement in weariness, good company, and the even life. And what, Tigerfoot, is achievement in alertness? Stop here a moment. This Tigerfoot must be the nickname of this person. This Long Ni is Bhyagapaja. His family name was Bhyagapaja, which is Tigerfoot. And Long Ni is Digajanu, was his nickname. So here the Buddha addresses him by his family name. And what, Tigerfoot, is achievement in alertness? Herein, by whatsoever activity a clansman make his living, whether by the plough, by trading, or by cattle herding, by archery, or as a Raja's man, or by any of the crafts, he is deft and tireless, gifted with an inquiring turn of mind into ways and means. He is able to arrange and carry out his job. This is called achievement in alertness. And what, Tigerfoot, is achievement in weariness? Herein, whatsoever wealth a clansman get together by work and zeal, collect by the strength of his arm, earn by the sweat of his brow, and justly obtain in a lawful manner, such he keeps by watch and ward, thinking, now how can I arrange so that Rajas may not get this wealth out of me, nor thieves steal it, nor fire consume it, nor water carry it off, nor treacherous heirs make off with it. This is called achievement in weariness. And what, Tigerfoot, is good company? Herein, in whatsoever village or market town a clansman dwell, he consorts, converses, engages in talk with householders or householders' sons, young men reared in virtue, old men old in virtue, full of faith, virtue, charity, and wisdom. He emulates the fullness of faith in such as are full of faith. He emulates the fullness of virtue in such as are full of virtue. He emulates the fullness of charity in such as are full of charity. He emulates the fullness of wisdom in such as are full of wisdom. This is called good company. And what, Tigerfoot, is the even life? Herein, a clansman, while experiencing both gain and loss in wealth, continues his business serenely, not unduly elated or depressed. He thinks, thus my income, after deducting the loss, will stand at so much, and my outgoings will not exceed my income. Just as one who carries scales, or his apprentice knows on holding up the balance, that either by so much it has dipped down or by so much it has tilted up. Even so, Tigerfoot, a clansman experiencing both gain and loss, continues his business serenely, neither unduly elated nor unduly depressed, but realizes that after allowing for the loss, his income will stand at so much, and that his outgoings will not exceed his income. If, Tigerfoot, this clansman have but small earnings and live on a grand scale, it will be rumored of him, this clansman eats his wealth like a fig tree glutton, and if his earnings be great and he live meanly, rumor will say of him, this clansman will die like a starveling. Wherefore this clansman continues his business serenely, knowing that his outgoings will not exceed his income. This is called the even life. Tigerfoot, the 4 channels for the flowing away of amassed wealth are these: looseness with women, debauchery in drinking, knavery in dice play and friendship, companionship and intimacy with evil doers. Such, just as in the case of a great reservoir with only 4 inlets and only 4 outlets. If a man should close the inlets and open the outlets, and there should be no proper fall of rain, a lessening is to be expected in that great reservoir, and not an increase. Even so, Tigerfoot, there are these 4 channels for the flowing away of amassed wealth: looseness with women, debauchery in drinking, knavery in dice play, and friendship, companionship, and intimacy with evil doers. Tigerfoot, the 4 channels for the flowing in of great wealth are these: abstinence from looseness with women, from debauchery in drinking, from knavery in dice play, and having friendship, companionship, and intimacy with the good. Just as in the case of a great reservoir with only 4 inlets and only 4 outlets, if a man should open the inlets and close the outlets, and if there should be a proper fall of rain, an increase may be expected in that great reservoir and not a lessening. Even so, Tigerfoot, there are these 4 channels for the flowing in of great wealth: abstinence from looseness with women, from debauchery in drinking, from knavery in dice play, and the friendship, companionship, and intimacy with the good. These, Tigerfoot, are the 4 conditions which lead to a clansman's advantage and happiness here on earth. These 4 conditions, Tigerfoot, lead to a clansman's advantage and happiness in the world to come. What for? Achievement in faith, achievement in virtue, achievement in charity, and achievement in wisdom. And what is achievement in faith? Herein a clansman has faith and believes in the awakening of the Tathagata, thinking of a truth he is the exalted one. This is called achievement in faith. And what is achievement in virtue? Herein a clansman abstains from taking life, from stealing, from adultery, from lying, and from taking liquor. This is called achievement in virtue. And what is achievement in charity? Herein a clansman dwells at home with heart purged of the stain of avarice, and etc., etc. This is called achievement in charity. And what is achievement in wisdom? Herein a clansman is wise and is endowed with wisdom into the rise and fall of things, etc. This is called achievement in wisdom. These, Tigerfoot, are the 4 conditions which lead to a clansman's advantage and happiness in the world to come. That's the end of the sutta. So this sutta is a very practical sutta for lay persons, and because this person who came to ask the Buddha, he said he still wants to enjoy life as a lay person, but what are the things that he should cultivate? So the Buddha told him that he should cultivate achievement in alertness, achievement in weariness, and keep good company, and have an even life. And achievement in alertness is to be skillful in his work, in his job. Weariness is to be able to guard his wealth, his property. Good company is keeping company with good persons, and even life is to be able to spend his money wisely and not exceeding his income, and not to be unduly elated or depressed. And then the 4 channels for the flowing away of wealth is looseness with women, drinking, gambling, and having evil friends. And the opposite leads to flowing in of great wealth. And then 4 things lead to a person's advantage and happiness in the world to come, just as before, is the achievement in faith, having the faith in the Buddha, Dhamma and Sangha, virtue, keeping the precepts, charity, that means being generous and practicing charity. And the last one is wisdom, that means knowing that things are impermanent, that they arise and pass away, and that basically means understanding the Dhamma. So these are the things that will bring a person happiness in the world to come. And today we come to Sutta 8.6.58. The Buddha said, monks, a monk is endowed with 8 qualities. A monk who is endowed with 8 qualities is worthy of offerings, worthy of gifts, worthy of oblations, deserves to be reverently saluted. The world's peerless field for merit. What 8? Hearing, a monk is virtuous. He is learned. Number 2. Number 3, he dwells strenuous, steadfast, energetic, shirking not the burden of righteousness or wholesomeness. Number 4, he is a forest dweller, having his bed and seat apart from mankind. Number 5, enduring likes and dislikes, dwelling in continuous mastery of dislikes which arise. Number 6, enduring fear and dismay, dwelling in continuous mastery of fear and dismay which arise. Number 7, he attains to the 4 jhana states. Number 8, he destroys the asavas. He who is endowed with these 8 qualities is worthy of offerings, worthy of gifts, worthy of oblations, deserves to be reverently saluted, the world's peerless field for merit. That's the end of the sutta. So these are the 8 qualities which makes a monk very virtuous and worthy of salutations. Number 1, he's virtuous. Number 2, he's learned. That means he's learned in the Dhamma, the Buddha's teachings, more specifically the Dhamma Vinaya, the suttas and the Vinaya. And then number 3, he is energetic, always getting rid of unwholesome states of mind and developing wholesome states of mind. Number 4, he is a forest dweller. That means he dwells in seclusion, having his lodgings away from mankind. Number 5, he is always trying to master dislikes which arise. And number 6 is always trying to master fear which arise. Fear which arise is more likely in lonely places. If a monk dwells alone in lonely places, sometimes at night, there might be certain things, certain sounds which make him afraid. So he has to master the fear. Number 7, he attains to the 4 jhanas. The 4 jhanas, the jhanas are considered uttari manusa dhamma, higher than human attainment. That is why if a person can attain the jhanas, he is worthy of reverence. And the last one, he destroys the asavas, becomes liberated.